Hi, Ms. Holmes.
Hey, Mr. Domowski.
So what are we going to be talking about today?
Water insolubility curves.
Okay. So do you know what a solubility curve is?
Not exactly. Can you explain?
Yeah, okay. So it's a line on a graph
Awesome.
that is used to figure out how much solute can be dissolved
Excellent.
at any temperature.
Temperature.
Okay. So if you've ever tried to dissolve sugar in iced tea before, it's a lot harder than it is to dissolve sugar in hot tea. So the temperature affects how much you can dissolve. Okay. So and different substances dissolve easier than other substances. Okay, so that's a big graph you've got there on that paper. Let's take a look at that graph. Okay, so we've got a lot going on in that graph. Okay, so the bottom part of that graph, what's that bottom part say?
Temperature.
Okay, so let's highlight that.
Highlight that in pink along the x-axis.
So looks kind of red, so whenever I think of like the red or pink little bottom of the thermometer, that's why we highlighted that in pink. That one's real easy. It just goes from 0 to 100. Water boils at 100 degrees and it freezes at 0 degrees, so that's why that's as far as that goes.
Excellent.
Okay, now the next one, the first word is
solubility,
which means what?
That it can dissolve in water.
Okay, so that's how that it can be dissolved in water. So it's really like the next part says grams of salt. What does grams mean?
It's a unit of measurement, so just how much salt can be dissolved in the water?
Right. So if I have 10 grams, it's a lot lighter than something that weighs 50 grams, right?
Exactly.
So the grams of salt. Now, yeah, go ahead and highlight. So the salt is a scientific term that doesn't just mean table salt, it means all kinds of different salts. So if you look on this graph, there's about 15 different types of salt. So one of the salts we're going to talk about is NaNO3, which is called sodium nitrate. You see that up, that NaNO3? We're going to highlight that real quick, and we're going to highlight that line underneath it. That line goes with the NaNO3.
Excellent.
Okay, another one we're going to talk about is potassium chromate, and that is the KNO3. Okay, and you see that line is matched up with that one. Then another one we're going to talk about is potassium nitrate, which is KClO3. Sorry, no. Sorry, potassium nitrate is KNO3. Potassium chromate is KClO3.
Gotcha.
So that one's potassium chromate right there. Okay, so we're not going to expect you to be able to memorize what these names mean, so if you ever have trouble matching up the name to the symbol, just ask your teacher. Your teacher will know which one it belongs to. But I think in all of your practice problems, it's just going to say the formula, so you'll just see the formula.
Excellent.
So now we're only going to be talking about these three in this example, but you could be asked about any of these lines. So just make sure you see that the formula that's next to the line belongs to that line. Yeah. And there's a grid underneath it. Don't let that grid confuse you with that line. That grid's to help you find different points on the map.
Excellent.
The last part you highlighted there in blue is in 100 grams of H2O. That 100 you can always pretty much ignore. All that means is we're talking about the same amount of water all over this graph. And that is this much water, 100 milliliters. It's this little beaker right here. It's about the size of like a juice cup you would give a small kid. It's about a cup. So about half the size of like a coffee mug. So it's not a lot of water.
Excellent.
Okay, so now if you look, we've got a couple of examples. So we've got a point in the line where we have 95 grams at 20 degrees Celsius. So where's my 95 grams at?
We're looking at 95 about right here.
Okay, so it's
20
halfway
right here.
Right.
We'll come up, draw a point.
Where they meet.
Which is above the line.
Above the line. So if it's above the line, that means there's more dissolved than the water than it can actually hold. Then it's something that's called supersaturated. Like Superman flies above the sky, supersaturated is above the line. Okay, now my other example is for potassium chromate, but it's at 70 grams at 90 degrees.
Which is right on the line.
Oh, yes. We did the wrong one. Okay, so 70 grams. Here, go ahead and highlight that one. So we actually highlighted the wrong one for potassium chromate. Should have remembered that Cr is a symbol for chromate, but it is on the line for potassium chromate, so that means it is saturated. And then my other example that I've got here is, let's move your graph up there so we can read it, 20 grams at 30 degrees Celsius. So where is my 20 grams?
At
30 degrees, and they meet up right about there.
Which is below the KNO.
Right. So that's unsaturated. So if you look, it's talking about this line right here. KNO3 is potassium nitrate. So since it's below that line, it's unsaturated. It's under the line.
Excellent.
Okay. Pretty easy to understand so far?
Pretty easy to me.
Okay. Now let's go ahead and take a look at your next page in your module. This is some guided practice.
All right.
What I'd like you to do, if you can, pause the video. I want you to try these problems on your own and then watch the video to check to see if you did it right. Okay? But you're going to use this graph. It's only got one line on it. So we're only talking about one type of salt in this one. Okay? Okay, we hope you paused the video and tried some of these problems on your own. So without any further, let's take a quick look at what we've got here.
Excellent.
So that first question says 150 grams of sodium acetate. So 150 is right there in 100 grams of water. What I say you can always do with that 100 grams of water. Do you need to know that for this problem?
Not necessarily.
No, you can just ignore that 100 grams of water. The water's the same constantly. At 50 degrees. Okay, so we've got 150 and 50, and they meet up right about there.
So it's above.
So it's above the line. So what does that make it? Saturated, unsaturated, or supersaturated?
Supersaturated.
It's supersaturated. Very good. So if you got C for that question number 1, you did it right. Okay, let's take a look at question 2. Scoot your paper up so they can see it on the screen. All right, so that one says 100 grams of sodium acetate is dissolved in 100 grams of water at 45 degrees Celsius.
$100 grams?
Uh-huh.
So we're looking right here probably. There we go. I do want.
No, you're not on the 100 grams.
Oops,
I'm
here
sorry.
we go.
Yeah, there we go. So we're right on the line there, right?
Excellent, yes.
So we are...
Oops, my bad. Let me go over one more.
Okay, so we are saturated here.
Saturated.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you got A for question number 2, you did it right. So if you tried question number 3, 150 grams of sodium acetate is dissolved in 100 grams of water at 50 degrees Celsius. It might look very similar to question number 1.
Therefore being supersaturated.
Supersaturated. It's the exact same question. So you might have put a dot on top of that dot that you already had up there, and if you did it right. Question number 4. This is where it gets kind of trickier. Okay, so it says if 50 grams of sodium acetate was dissolved in 100 grams of water at 100 degrees Celsius, how many more grams of sodium acetate can it hold until it's saturated? Okay, so we got to put a dot there. So we've got 50 grams.
So looking at 100, going to 50.
Okay. 100 degrees, 50 grams of sodium acetate. We're well in the unsaturated range right now. We're well underneath the line.
Yes.
I want to know how many more grams can I add until I get up to that saturated line.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90.
Okay, So I could add 90 more grams of water, or of sodium acetate. So if you look at where she put the dot right here and carry it all the way over, it hits the 140 mark. So that's why we wrote 140 minus 50 here. So that gets us to our 90 grams.
Excellent.
Okay, so the next question says, if I have a saturated solution at 75 degrees Celsius, how many grams of sodium acetate are dissolved in the solution? Okay, so there's my 75 degrees. I'm going to put a dot where it's saturated. Where is it saturated at?
Saturated right here at about 120.
Okay, so put your paper down so they can see.
Oh.
There we go. So we put the little dot right here. So if you follow that down all the way down to 75, and then if we go across, we can figure out how much we dissolved, and that's right at 120. It's 2 ticks above that 100. So, all right. Okay. So if you have any questions, let your teacher know.